I tend to make in batches.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the actual articles that you're making, do you make what you want and then put them on sale, or do you have a list of things which?
It's a mixture, you know. When somebody comes through the door and says, "I want a big bin for making bread, for putting bread in," and well, you're an idiot if you say no, really, because it's 100 quid. Isn't it? So I tend to, I get quite a lot of people ask for things, and I never really turn it down. Unless it's something I really don't want to make. But then, having got those, I don't necessarily do them all at once. But as far as working, the rhythm of work goes, the scope is so vast. You have to narrow it down. You have to be very, very hard with yourself and say, okay, today I'm going to make jokes. Because if you go to the workshop with the attitude, I could make plates or jugs or tea bowls or just pots. You sit there and you're there till 12 o'clock before you got anywhere. So I find, certainly myself, I have to say, okay, well, I'm going to have 2 days on the jugs. And I'll probably throw for a morning and just throw them away, just playing around with ideas and different forms and so on. And when I've got something I think I can work on, then I'll probably make 20 or 30. And that's a day's. And then it usually works out that, depending on the time of year, of course, if you have a good day's throwing, you'll spend the next day finishing them off. So it tends to work in 2-day cycles.
But you make things which you want to make, and then you present those to possible purchasers, rather than say, the reverse of like having a list. I make 1 pint jugs, 2 pint jugs.
No, I think the two are totally different entities, and I think it's the difference between being what I consider to be a traditional style potter, and you've got to be careful what term I use now. An artist in your own right. I mean, I still consider myself a traditional potter because I'm using traditional methods, and the simpler I get those methods, and the closer to nature I get in the way I'm making and firing, then the closer to the roots of the process I get, which is what I try to work towards all the time. At the same time, sometimes I always feel I have to justify what I make, but I don't really. If I think about it hard, I just make and say, well, that's what I make.
Take it or leave it.
And people come up and say, well, do you make thin pottery? And I said, well, no.
I mean, it's a fairly basic point, isn't it? The fact that you're operating, because you are earning a living, aren't you, what you're doing.
We try to,
yeah. And in that sense, do you view success in terms of the way the firing affects the forms that you throw? Does that alter the price?
Yeah, that's a good. I'm glad you brought that up because I can have two. Let's take 2 bottles, same shape, same size, and they'll probably be two completely different prices. And that's a result of the criteria I put upon myself. That bottle there, that white one. That's I know I'll never sell it. It's priceless. It's the best part of the firing for me. It's what I'm looking for. It's a subtle balance between clay and surface quality and fire. And I rarely get really excited by other people's pots, because there's very little touch of fire upon them. I've always been a great admirer of John Maltby's work, because he uses decoration to such an extent that the decoration speaks for itself. He doesn't need a big kiln. He doesn't have to fire for 2 days, because he's so good with his decorative techniques.
But so then, in sort of taking that a little bit further, is the process one of almost constant disappointment, if you like? It's a search.
Constant disappointment?
Yeah.
For me?
Well, there's that one.
Yeah.
Which is, has achieved what you want.
Yeah.
So presumably others will have not got to that same pointing?
Well, I'll probably get, probably in 6 months' time, I shall probably be looking at that one and thinking, well, it's not as good as I thought it was at the time.
So it's the constant evolution.
Yeah.
And how much does the element of chance, if you like, because obviously you've got a kiln like that,
Yeah.
you make a number of bottles.
Yeah.
How does the control of fire?
Well, I spent almost 10 years working on the same tap. I mean, when I was at Farnham, I built a hole in the ground basically, and fired it for 3 years.
Yeah.
And since then, the kiln I've got now has always been a dream, almost unattainable dream. And 10 years later, it's actually come to fruition. And well, I can't stop.
No,
I can't stop making. And the results are a constant source of pleasure to me. And the ones that don't make it, they don't make it. You can't.
Have you got any sort of rough indication of proportion
In
success, or do they drop into different categories?
well, at my last kiln in Northampton, I was up to about 90% good work out of the fire, which I was quite happy with. And made a big mistake last firing with it. It was the first time I ever messed up a glaze batch. Weighed something out wrong, and about 25% of it had ash glaze on towards the back of the kiln, and it all came out like green sugar. I must have put twice as much clay in as I should have done. But with a cross draft kiln which is so long, there's such a variation of work, and the kiln atmosphere tends to affect different pots at different times.
But as the number of firings increases, then the awareness of what happens in which places related to.
Yeah. I mean, I know what I'm doing now, totally, with a wood kiln. It's just that it takes, I think another 2 firings, and I'll start to understand that one. Not the actual function of the firing, but where certain things happen in relation to the shape and how to pack it. For instance, I packed it very loose at the bottom this time, and it was a little bit too loose, I think. It's kind of a sort of kamikaze existence, because you've got so many eggs in one basket. But once you sorted the basket out, then I think you can really start to move. And I've always wanted to work with a big kiln. Not too big, if you get to a stage where you're only firing twice a year, I don't think you can ever develop fast enough. And then there's the other problem of time and economics. If I had a kiln half that size, for instance, I'd use almost the same amount of wood and the same amount of time to fire it, with only half the amount of work. Just in pure economics of collecting wood, chopping it, stacking it. Anyway. When I first started making pots, I had heroes, pottery heroes, and their influence was quite profound. But over the years, that's sort of mellowed to a point where I hardly ever look at pottery books now. Hardly ever. I'm influenced by the materials I use, the clay, the different materials I can mix with the clay, the kiln, and pots from the previous firing. I'm always looking at pots from the previous firing, thinking, wow, that little bit, I can use that for something.